Hey everyone, welcome to Breakthrough Conversations. My name is Danielle Perry and I am the host. You already know I am so excited that you are tuned in today for another episode of this podcast. And if this is your first time, this is a Christian podcast which features people of all ages, and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge, situation, or season in their lives, or maybe they're on their way to overcoming with God's help. And they do share authentically. Well, if you're back, then you know that this is the marriage series, and this is the 6th episode, y'all, within this series. And it features none other than Daniel and Mia Morrison, and the title of this episode is Overcoming Marriage Being Hard. Daniel and Mia, thank you again so much for being on this podcast. And those of you who are watching, as you know from the title, this episode is going to kind of talk about how their marriage has been challenging. At the time of this recording, they were married for about 1.5 years, and they talked about just difficulties that they've experienced since being married. And so Daniel and Mia, thank you again for just being vulnerable as you shared on this podcast. I know it may not have been the easiest thing to do, but you guys said, you know what? We're just going to be real and talk about how actually since we've been married, it has not been very easy. I know that this episode is going to be a blessing to maybe some couples who can relate. So without further ado, y'all, I want you to enjoy this episode. And this is part 1 of episode 33. Enjoy and be blessed. Mr. Daniel and Mrs. Mia Morrison. Hey guys. Hi. Thanks again for being on this podcast. And for those who don't know, I actually met the Morrisons through my husband because Daniel works with Jared. And so we went on a double date about, I don't know, it's been a while now because before you guys got married.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I know the Morrisons. And again, thank you both so much for being on today. So before we jump into the questions, I just want you both to introduce yourselves and just tell a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, sure.
You got it.
Oh, thanks. So like you said, I'm Daniel Morrison. I grew up overseas in Kenya. My parents were missionaries over there, so I spent about 15 years there in total.
Wow.
And then came back to the States, studied music in college, and so that's sort of how I got connected with Jared back there behind all the technology. So I've been working with the Baltimore Symphony Orchids program, which is a music education nonprofit for coming up on 4 years now.
Awesome. Feels longer to me. Why does it feel longer to me? I don't know. It just does. But that's cool. So what about you, Mia?
Yeah, I'm Mia Morrison. We got married now.
A year and 5 months ago today.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
today?
Today, yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. He's better with the numbers than I am. And I grew up in Northern Virginia. I went to school at UMBC and just fell in love with Baltimore while I was here and decided, well, God actually kind of instructed, like, stay.
Okay.
And post-grad, I studied theater design and production in college and thought I was going down that route, and then minored in entrepreneurship and innovation, and then thought like, oh, maybe social entrepreneurship. Ended up starting a nonprofit when I graduated, which is like a whole other story.
Okay.
And then God redirected to working with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship on college campuses. So it's been an interesting track of life, and God keeps weaving it together, and marriage is another component of that now, or a totally transforming, actually, element of that. So
Absolutely.
it's exciting.
All right. Okay. Well, we are going to hop into the questions. We do not have a title yet, but that is okay. Because like Daniel said before we started recording, something will probably come, I'm sure, after we're done with, just our conversation. So I actually want to start out with how and when did you guys meet?
Yeah. So I moved to Baltimore in end of the summer 2019 and started going to same church as Mia, and so we met a few weeks after that, just like after the service, like, oh, hey, what's your name? So but yeah, we didn't really know like I guess when you remember us like actually getting to know each other some was a couple months later, right?
Yeah, I think I remembered meeting you that a Sunday.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a moment.
It was a little bit for me, not gonna lie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember sort of just like making a mental note when I met her. I was just like, whoa, like, because she explained some of the things she said in her intro about like, oh, I did some theater in college and like always loved acting and stuff. And so it's like, oh, she like studied theater, and then she's like, and I have this nonprofit that's like really justice oriented, and I was just like, whoa. So, but I mean, it's first time meeting someone, and we didn't have tons of interaction, but I had something filed away.
Note, right?
Anyway, sorry, you keep going.
No, yeah. And then we auditioned for the worship team at our church at the same time. And at that audition, I think that was the first time I sort of got to know Daniel a bit more of like, oh, this is what this person is like. Off of that, our worship team decided to start like a worship playlist, and he added a song that was intriguing to me, and I added a song that was intriguing to him. So that was when initial friendship kind of connection was starting.
Okay. All right. So at church, all right, that's how Jared and I met as well, at our church, which is really cool. And so, I'm sorry. You said there was a spark there for you, right? And not really for you. That was the same for Jared. I just had to throw that in there. All right. So, did you know early on that you guys were meant for each other? So I guess kind of give us a backstory as to when you started to court and what led to that.
Yeah. So for me, I had been in a year or two of kind of grappling with God about how do I relate to men, because this just past experiences had been so disjointed. I was getting to the point where I was like, I'm giving up a little bit. And some really wise mentors kind of shared with me. One thing that one of them shared was, if someone comes, like, I think God will make it obvious. So that had been my prayer. Like, God, you
make it clear,
make it
right?
obvious. And I didn't want to like stumble into things or like be unintentional or like cause more pain for someone else or for myself. And so when Daniel and I became friends, God was really clarifying, like he brought up 3 words, purity, patience, and priorities.
Okay.
And was just saying like, you need to be pure in this friendship and have a lot of patience in how I'm leading you in your life right now, and pay attention to the priorities that I'm highlighting. So we were just kind of building and growing our friendship, and I was very much denying any kind of feelings that were beginning to brew.
No, shut it down. Shut it down.
And I knew at the time he had interest for someone else in our church, and I was very aware of that.
Yeah.
So it was like,
After the initial spark, not gonna, God,
so yeah. And then eventually I had like a week away from home where I was like, okay, I need to use this week to really figure out how I'm feeling about Daniel, so I can be honest with him, so we can move forward in a healthy way. Because that was one of the mistakes I had made in previous relationships, was one or both of us were friends but had more under the surface, and we didn't talk about it honestly, and that's what caused pain.
Yep, understood.
Oh, what?
So all this is like, when we really started becoming friends was basically like the week after the pandemic started. Everything was shut down, and we started like exchanging some messages. You invited me to your like virtual birthday art party. We discovered that like I had just started reading a book that she's like, I've wanted to read that book for a long time. Like maybe we can read it and then like hold each other accountable to reading and talk about what we're learning, stuff like that. So that's when our relationship started growing, and then we started like going on walks sometimes because everything had to be outside because of COVID.
Right.
So, and I remember distinctly there's this one walk where Mia was sharing about like, I've been in what you're just saying about like, I've been in, friendships with other guys, and like, like they think it's maybe more than it really is. and stuff. And I'm over there behind my mask because we were like walking around outside with masks on. I'm just like, yeah, like who would think that? That's really dumb. Like, oh man, I was just thinking that. Like,
right.
And so, yeah. And it was funny because like I had been having those feelings, but then like I processed a lot of things with my mom. I was like, talked to mom about it, and she's like, oh Dan, she was probably like trying to let you know that she's like just interested in friendship or whatever. Yeah. So it was like
yeah.
It is, yeah.
Which was accurate at the time. It was like that. A lot of what has happened throughout our relationship has been like, I think everything kept at a very slow, intentional pace where both of us could feel, or at least I felt very safe in a way that I hadn't felt in other relationships.
That's good.
Perhaps almost to a fault.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. So I think there's some times where it's maybe like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But, sorry, I interrupted you to say that. Sorry, you got it.
Oh yeah. So and then after that, I realized, and I shared with Daniel, hey, actually, I have feelings that are a bit more than friendship. Like, how can we move forward? Well, turns out he did too, which was a shock to me, and it was a shock to him that I.
Yeah, because the way she told me
was bad.
Oh,
should I not share it?
What happened? Oh.
Maybe not.
Okay. It was just, yeah.
Poor communication.
I wasn't expecting it up until the moment she said, like, I'm interested. I was like, wait, what? Is that? I didn't realize that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
So yeah, and then we took a time away, and Daniel came back to me with this long document he had written out of, well, he said, I want to date you, and then here's what I think dating is, was like the whole document was, this is what I would want it to be or expect it to be or what I think it should be. And I was sitting there just waiting for something to misalign because I had formed really like pretty intense opinions about what dating should be at that point. Again, because of the ways I'd been hurt in the past. And yeah, I was waiting for something to be like, oh, no, we need to talk about that because no. Or to be the reason why I'm like, no, we shouldn't date because that wouldn't work. Everything was obvious.
Obvious. What was that word? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like exactly what I would have written in a document about this is what dating should be and should look like was what Daniel had written down and was sharing with me.
Wow.
So at least the dating at that point felt obvious.
It felt obvious. So what inspired that document?
I mean, trying to think back to that. I mean, yeah, I don't remember what the conversation was before. Like she expressed interest. I was like, oh, me too. And then it was like, I think it was just sort of like let's take some time and like, think through this and like, can we talk about, what that would look like? Like, because it was sort of like, we've expressed how we feel, but now how do we move forward?
Gotcha.
So like, it was like, all right, like I'm going to really sit down and be like, all right, if we move forward, I think this is what it should look like. Or like, how can we do this well? And like, this is what I'm interested in. I don't remember exactly what it was, if I was saying this is like not what it's going to be, but it was probably some of both.
I like that because I don't know how you felt, Mia, but if I were you, I probably would have felt a sense of security there because it's like he took the lead in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that initiative, I'm sure, probably meant a lot to you. And especially because it had everything that was obvious and everything that you would have written. So that's good. So at what point did you guys know, okay, I believe that this is the one I want to marry. I believe that this is the one that God has for me. About when did that happen?
For me, about like 5 or 6 months into us dating, Daniel was having like repeated instances of Kenya coming up, just in seemingly random ways, but it's never random when God's saying things. And so there was a serious kind of discernment he was going through around, is God calling me to go back to where I grew up, to serve at the school that he had grown up in. And when he was seriously considering that, we were not that serious in our relationship yet, where but I started asking the question of, would I go to Kenya, or what part might I have in, if that's his journey, is that also my journey? And that helped me start to realize, I'm a lot more
invested in this. Yeah. Okay. So about 5 or 6 months into the relationship, would you say about the same, or what do you think?
I think at the same time, I had lots of interest, and like I was like, I think I feel this way, but like also like fear, I think, was in there of like, but like, how do I know? No, like, and I think, so like I think there was some hesitation, and I don't necessarily know if that was. I think there's some wisdom in like, there's still a lot of things that we still need to grow in learning about each other. But I also don't think fear is like a positive thing.
Right.
So just like around that same, I mean, I don't know, part of me wants to say like, man, that first day we met in church, I was like, and then like, or when we started dating, or, there's all these points along the way when I was just like, man, like I'm quite taken with her. And, that's what I said to my mom before we were even dating. So, but yeah, I think it was a few months after that when like, I think the time when we like both really acknowledged it to each other was we had like a week of like awful like arguing and like we were having some really serious conversations, not about like us necessarily, but it was just like, it was a hard week. And like but we got through it, and we were just like, wow, like if we can survive a week like that, like maybe there's like really something, maybe like I think maybe we should get married, because like so I think coming through that really difficult week of just continuously hard conversations and not really getting resolved, but still being like, I'm still committed to you in this relationship, at the level that was appropriate in a dating relationship. I think that's a big turning point.
Gotcha. Yeah. So how long did you date before you proposed, Daniel? How long did you guys date? Yeah,
so we started dating, it was July 15th, and I proposed on May 8th. So, someone want to do math? Like 8-ish months? 8-9 months.
Okay.
Yeah, of dating.
I think. Okay. So, about 8 or 9 months. And talk to us about the proposal. What was that like?
I mean, it was really exciting. There's lots of stories I could probably tell. I don't know how much detail you want.
Whatever you want to share.
Yeah. Basically I was like, part of it was ordering the ring, and like Mia had given me some ideas for like what a ring would look like. And so she gave me some options, and I picked one, and I was like, I think this is the one she liked the most. And
he was absolutely correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But when I was like, and she had said something like, I don't want one that turns my finger green or something. So I was like doing all this research on like what kind of metal turns your finger green, and I read something
because I was emphasizing it doesn't need to be really expensive, but I didn't want him to interpret that as like a very cheap ring either.
Absolutely.
Oh man. So anyways, I ordered the ring, but like in that process somewhere I had changed the color from like gold to like white. So like of course, like I can't propose until I get the ring, and I was ordering it on Etsy, and it was shipping from Canada, and like there's all these things, and so basically I ordered the wrong ring, and the seller's like, it's ready, and sends me a picture. I'm like,
that's not it.
The color looks a little like off, and I looked back, I was like, oh man. So I had to reorder the ring, so I was like, anyways, that pushed it back a little bit.
How long did it push it back? Was it a long time?
It was only like maybe like 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. But I imagine that anticipation in you was like, what is happening? Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, for the actual proposal, I put together like this scrapbook of like all these pictures and like journal entries I'd written like, before we were even dating about her and things like that, and like put it all together. And then the day of, we like went on a photo scavenger hunt, and we like took all these pictures together at like different places that were significant, and at each place like there would be like a clue that would lead us to the next place or whatever. And then the last place was me. So Mia is an artist. She paints murals. She painted this one at a local community center.
Okay.
And I was like, what better place than like in front of her own mural? And I had some great friends from church who like, I just asked them for a little bit of help and they like went all out and they like decorate, like I had a friend who was like pulling ivy off of abandoned buildings and like they used that to like but it
was so beautiful too.
I love it.
And I bought like these candles that she said she liked a certain scent, and I like bought a bunch of them. We had candles and stuff, and then so the last clue led her there, and then I like pulled out the scrapbook and we like went through it, and then I proposed.
So Mia, did you have any idea that was gonna happen?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't fool her one bit.
So what were you feeling in that moment as you're just going through the scavenger hunt? What was going through your head?
Well, so before the scavenger hunt even began, I had a freak out with Daniel.
Okay.
Where I was like, I think this is what's about to happen, and like I was scared.
Okay.
And also it was like ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. Like, but then he was able to like work with me through that.
Okay.
And say like, well, here's the thing, like, and totally met me where I was at. And just as the scavenger hunt went on, I just felt this like, increasing just like safety and security. And like this person really cared for me in a moment where like I could have messed everything up.
So you were like freaking out because of fear.
Fear and it sounds so ridiculous to say, but we were about to take a bunch of pictures, and then also like you only get proposed to once, and I felt like my hair looked really bad.
I get that.
I felt self-conscious basically, and was freaking out about that unnecessarily.
Gotcha. No, I get that. I get
so
that.
Ridiculous.
Like, this is only okay. He's about to propose, and my hair looks a mess. These pictures are gonna be forever. I understand that.
Which is
Okay.
like so silly.
Yeah. Looking back, right? It's like okay, but that's cool. Okay, so how long after the proposal did you guys marry?
So that was in May, and then we got married the following January.
The following January. And January 2020.
January 2022.
Yeah.
2022. Okay, right.
Yeah,
Because
so the whole relationship pandemic. We started dating July of 2020, got engaged May of 2021, got married 22. So like that whole time, it's like COVID is like looming in the background.
Yes. Okay. So talk about just the challenges that you faced leading up to the wedding day. Because like you said, you're in the middle of COVID. I'm sure. I remember you guys had, I think, a venue, and then you had to change it, right? Am I saying that right?
Kind of.
Something had to be changed, I think.
Many things had to be changed.
So just talk about that. What were some of the things that took place?
Yeah, we planned the wedding mostly in the summer of 2021 when everyone thought COVID was kind of dwindling down, maybe even ending. And then I think it was Delta came.
Yeah, like I think it was the Delta variant. Or something like that.
Came at the end of summer when two of my friends got married. One of them totally canceled their wedding. The other one had their wedding, but like a lot of trouble came.
I'm sure.
Because of COVID. And so we didn't know what would be coming by the time January rolled around. It turned out to be peak Omicron in the end.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at the COVID graph, like the
Omicron?
highest point of all the years is like 2 days after our wedding or something. It's just like,
really?
It's like, there's our wedding.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. So, which, I mean, at that point, we were like, we planned this date. Like, we just kept having to figure out what changes, what.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
a big part of that was, like, whittling down our guests. Because at first we were like, we're inviting everybody!
Right.
And then we, like, narrowed it down to... didn't we have to go through, like, 2 narrowing downs? Because I think we narrowed it down to, like, just, like, relatives and, like, a few other people the first time. And then in, like, October or something, I think we narrowed it down to, like, immediate family or something. Immediate family and grandparents and a few the wedding party.
The wedding party, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, because in that time we learned that the people in the most immediate circles we could potentially invite had very, very varying degrees of, like, how they were engaging with the pandemic and safety measures or not. And so we wanted them to be able to be there, so we had to, that was like our lowest common denominator, basically, was polar opposite on the spectrum of difference of how you could engage with this thing. So that was ultimately part of why we did decide not very far out from the wedding to move it outdoors.
Yeah, 9 days before the wedding.
9 days before the wedding. Wow.
And then Daniel's dad ended up getting COVID, so it was good.
Oh, man. Dude, that was the worst, too. My dad calls me, like, 3 days before the wedding, like, hey, I have COVID. And I was like, it was terrible. And my sister got in the week before, but my sister, like, her window just passed that she was able to fly in, like, the day before the wedding. Okay. And, like, she had, so that was okay. But my dad got, he was right in the middle. He wasn't very sick, but it was like, well... So, yeah. but then we called, like, it was great. One of the elders at our church he was basically running when they turned the convention center into a hospital, he was basically in charge of that. So he like knows his COVID stuff. Okay. And so, and I called him, I was like, Chuck, like, what should we do? Like, my dad has COVID, and he's like, well, your dad has to be there for you, like, when you're getting married. So he's like, basically, like, just have him, like, stay, like, with his mask on, like, away from people. It's outside. It'll be fine. Yeah. And so, like, my dad was able to be there. But, man, it was...
Ooh. Yeah. I got a hint of just kind of the chaos within it all based on what Jared was sharing with me. He's like, man, we got to pray for the Morrisons because it's a lot right now, They're planning their wedding in this time, this time of COVID and having to move it outdoors. I remember when he shared it with me that it was going to be outdoors, I said, okay, so how's that going to work? So he told me, he said, well, we have like these heat packs that we're going to have. So he showed me like the heat pads that you guys gave all the bridal party, right? And the gloves and the hats. And I was like, hey, look, they're making it work. I know it's not the best of circumstances, but, when God gives you a time frame where you feel led to be married, you kind of want to stick with that, right? And you just pray that things are just going to fall in place and the people who are supposed to be there will be there. And I just can imagine for you guys, it was just a lot. I imagine it was a lot. I watched it online.
Thank you. I'm sure you were nice and comfortable.
And it was a beautiful ceremony despite, being outside, despite, the cold. I couldn't tell that you guys may have been really cold. I don't know if you were really cold or if the fact that you were getting married kind of took that away. I don't know. But, I'm glad everything, still worked out for you guys. Yeah. So talk about your wedding day. Just what was it like considering all that you had to do to prepare? Was there a shift in your emotions when that day came because you were finally at that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that sort of ties into that goes also with the planning and the shift is like when we made the decision to move it outside 9 days before, we like took some time to just write down like all the losses of like, well, now this won't be able to happen and now these people won't be able to be there and like, and so we had to take time and this is something I feel like I'm learning more about in our marriage, because me is a lot better at it than me. But we had to take time to grieve. We couldn't just be like, well, it's outside now. Like, and so, but yeah, I think when the wedding day came, like, yeah, it was exciting. It was fun. We like drove up to the wedding together because it was up in Bel Air, so it was like 45-minute drive or something from our place, from where we were living. And so, yeah, we like drove up together and were able to have that time. And then, we went off and got ready and yeah.
It was very like, because it was so small, it wasn't like performative at all. It was just sort of like, all right, we're here. Like, this is the day. And it felt so intimate with the people who were able to join us. And it just, it was kind of cobbled together in a really like pleasant way. And our friends, we invited certain people to be like staff for the wedding to help us like execute certain elements. And like the food was totally coordinated by our mentor couple who had kind of walked with us through dating and engagement. And there was just so much love in the food. So it was totally not what we thought we would have wanted planned, but it was also, in the end, like, we never could have planned for it to be that beautiful and loving in the way that it was. And just things we had to laugh about, because it's like,
otherwise
this is kind of ridiculous. It's like, it's just, and it helped make it, like, the serious things felt appropriately serious, and then all the things they're just sort of like frivolous about a wedding, it just felt like, we're just doing this, and it's sort of, we're all making the most of it, knowing that we're freezing together.
I mean, looking out, because it was like, I think a high of 21 or 22 that day, and the wind chill was like, 10 or 12 degrees, something like that. And so looking out and seeing all those people out there, like, y'all are out here, like, just sitting in these, like, metal chairs, like, I was like, wow, like, it felt so supportive and loving. Yeah.
That's awesome. When I was watching it, I don't know if there was a certain point, I don't know at what point in your wedding, did you have someone play the guitar and sing?
Yeah, that's my brother.
Okay, it was your brother. I think it was at that point, and I don't know if you ever saw my comment, but I was like, whoa, I really feel the Holy Spirit all up in your wedding. But I put that on Facebook. And I really did. And I think it was that moment where your brother was singing. But I just say that because, just considering what it was like physically, right? And all the things that, like you said, people were out there supportive, even though they were probably freezing cold. Yet God still was there the entire time, And so, I felt God's presence watching your wedding. I really did. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys. I don't know if you ever saw my comment. I was like,
did.
I feel the Holy Spirit. So that's awesome.
And so many people, we ended up making the link basically public for anyone to watch. And so many people joined our wedding that wouldn't have otherwise. And it's been a gift, like, since then, hearing from people who are like, I was there, like, I saw you.
Yeah, we keep hearing like, oh yeah, I watched your wedding. It's like, man, wow.
So maybe people that you may not have been able to invite, they were able to all join online. Yeah. So that's cool. You're married. And did you guys have a honeymoon at all? Okay,
did,
so talk about your honeymoon. Where'd you guys go?
Airbnb in the woods.
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't talk to a single other person the whole time. It was great. We love y'all, but no.
Yeah, it was really good. We basically wanted a like COVID-proof wedding, or honeymoon. Sorry, we did not have a COVID-proof wedding, but And like we both travel very similarly. Like we just want to relax and enjoy each other's presence. Didn't care about a lot of activities or anything like that. So we just hung out in the cabin.
Yeah. And rest and recovery is real. Like after a wedding, it's just like
after a wedding,
I'm really tired.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially after all that you guys had to do to prepare and all the changes that had to be made, like it's a lot of mental and emotional, things that go into that. So I'm glad you guys were able to get that rest on your honeymoon. So you come back home after your honeymoon.
Oh, man.
And the chaos began.
All right.
Not between us.
No. I don't even know if she knows what we're talking about.
I don't.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I want
feel
you
like I
guys
talked to
share.
Jared about it, but man. So, a couple things happened.
Well, we were crazy enough. We bought a house.
Yeah.
While engaged.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we closed on our house less than a month before we got married. Gotcha. So like you're wedding planning and then you're like getting the inspection done. You're doing the mazillion paperwork things and like
everything and it's COVID and all of that.
COVID,
yeah.
So and then Daniel moved into the house and then I moved in once we got back from the honeymoon. And 2 days after I moved in, one of the deadliest fires in like Baltimore's history happened around the block from our house.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It was the one where the the 3 firefighters lost their lives.
Oh no.
Yeah. It's like right around the corner from us.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was this kind of neighborhood grief and turmoil that we came into just as like I'm a brand new neighbor and Daniel's only been there a month.
3 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. And then the day after that, our like plumbing in our house had this significant issue that
I did hear about that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Was that the weather maybe? The cold?
Nah, it was, I think best they can figure, it was like because our house was like newly renovated, it had been vacant, and so like I think a lot of the construction material went down and sort of like scaled up the pipes, and I mean it was also, it's an old house, so there's just like it was a lot of different gunk. Yes. So
and no one had lived in the house prior to us, so we were the ones to discover that there was an issue. And the first plumber that came out was bad and just trying to make a lot of money off of it.
These new homeowners.
Yes. And told us we'd have to have like a full sewage replacement and very high amount quoted for that. And thankfully I was home alone at the time when they came, and I took a video of them scoping out the pipe to show to Daniel, but then we ended up showing that video to 2 other plumbers and being like, hey, what do you think?
Absolutely. Get a second opinion, right?
Yeah.
So what they end up saying, were they actually telling the truth, or?
In the end, the third plumber we talked with, the second plumber we talked with had a creative solution that would have cost less.
But still said you
do need a
to replace
replacement.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. The third plumber we talked with was like, oh, actually, you just need to clear out all this stuff.
Okay.
And they did that job, and it was amazing. Way less than the initial cost. What it did cost us was 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah, the whole process took us 2 weeks to get this plumber come out, and he says this, and then no, should we do this? And
Yeah, and
so you guys were still at home while all of that was happening?
Yeah. But
we were using our friends' bathrooms. Gracious friends.
Yeah.
It was so humbling.
This isn't supposed to be this way. Like, we just got married. What is happening?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But it was so good. And in the end, too, I was, once it all got fixed, or maybe before it all got fixed, I was in our lower bathroom, and I noticed the tiles in that bathroom had this, they were like blue with this gold kind of fleck in it that I hadn't noticed initially. I was like, ooh, I got inspired. I'm going to paint the wall of this bathroom to be this beautiful, like, blue marbled with, like, gold running through it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I taped off the walls, got it all ready, and then realized I hadn't moved my paint from the house I had been in before 2 hours
Okay.
yet. So I waited to grab it the next day. And the next day I read in Deuteronomy the story, like recounting the story of Moses with the Israelites in the desert. And when he took the idol, they had made the golden idol and he crushed it into dust and he scattered it in the river.
And then he made them drink it.
Yeah. And that image, though, of like gold dust floating through the river, God was saying, like, I am using this circumstance to flush your idols of control, of self-sufficiency, of pride, literally down the toilet.
Why do you have to do it this way? Wow, that's powerful.
So
Wow. Did you end up painting?
I did, yes.
I
It
would love
looks
to
good.
see it. I would love to see it.
Y'all gotta come over.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like, I now have 3 artist friends. Like, I have a friend. Her name is Erica. She's been on the podcast. She's a woodworker, so she like makes furniture. And then my friend Tatiana, she has been on the podcast as well. She does watercolor art. So I'm like, oh, I know another artist. That's so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Well, what a lesson. What a lesson. So you guys settle those issues, right?
Yeah.
So did you ever have, though, a moment of, okay, now I can breathe and we're married and now I can truly enjoy my spouse? Did that come soon after?
That's a good question. I feel like we've talked about how it I don't know if it's felt like there's been like a whole season of like that's all that it is. Like we just enjoy each other. This is great. Like there's definitely been times and moments and days and great things. But it sort of felt like, I mean, life kicked kind of right back. I mean, like life doesn't stop just because you got married. Like bam.
Right, yeah.
And so I think there's obviously I think there's a lot of excitement, like being newly married, and like we get to figure things out, and like we were just moving Mia into the house, and like where do we put all this stuff, and so I think there's a lot of like fun and excitement at the beginning.
Yeah, a lot of like this is all just new, and
Yeah.
we're learning what it looks like, and just the sort of like surprisingness of it and beauty of it. Early on in our marriage, it was a lot of that kind of story of external things pushing in, of like there were weird circumstances with neighbors. There was a lot going on with our church at the time that made it feel not necessarily like a place we could go to for support, but more that a place that needed our support. And then by the time that sort of kind of settled down was when it was like, oh, and now there's some things between us we're working through and we're needing to work out and figure out. And so it has been a little bit nonstop. Maybe even this summer might be the first time we sort of get to, but questioning like, will it be that or will there be something else?
So it's kind of felt like since after your honeymoon, or really preparing for the wedding, because that was a lot, right? It's just been, like you said, that back-to-back sort of external that's kind of infiltrating into our marriage. And at the same time, you're learning how to be married, right? So it's kind of all these things happening all at once. And like you said, maybe this summer will be the time to, but you still really haven't had that. And you guys been married for about 1.5 years now, right?
Yeah, coming up on 1.5 years. So, yeah, and I think you're right what you said about like there's been a lot of external things, but I think also a lot of it is what you said about just learning to be married. Like I remember, like my parents live about 2 hours away, so we'll go up and see them sometimes. And like I remember going for a walk with my dad and just talking about like so some of the things that are going on. Being newly married, and he's like, well, like when you get married, like you think you know the person, but in a lot of ways you're marrying someone who's still very much a stranger. And so I think that's been part of the story of like getting married has been like yes, we had friendship, we had dating, but then we started living with each other, and like and the walls, the places to hide go away.
Absolutely.
and it becomes like, wow, like, oh no, she can see me being like this now. Like, this isn't just when I'm at home by myself.
Right.
Like, now she's here,
Yeah.
and like, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I think there's been, I think it would be unfair to say like surprises, like, you didn't tell me you were like this. What do you mean? Like, but also
Not
like
intentional
Right.
surprises.
yeah, but just like, whoa, like, you really see things that way, or like, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think it's been very much like, just like, yeah, like, oh wow, I have so much to learn,
Yep.
and like, and I think especially for me, so I'm going off now, but like,
No, you're fine.
I'm the kind of person who like I'll read a lot of books about something, and I'll listen to podcasts, and like. Like, so I'm like, I read a bunch of marriage books, and like, I got this. Like, I'll be a great husband. And then I get in, and I'm like, oh, so
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah,
That's real. In the world, couples move in together before marriage, right? Because they want to test it out and see, are we really fit for one another? Can we really live together? What are this person's cleaning habits like? And, do they cook? Do they do this and that? But as Christians, we don't, well, it's good not to tempt ourselves. So wisdom says we shouldn't move in together before marriage, right? And so when we do it that way, we absolutely find out a lot of things about the other person that we didn't know before. And so I want you to talk about whatever you're comfortable with sharing. What are some of the things that you were challenged with one another? Something that maybe you found out after moving in, after being married, that you didn't know before. It can be a personality trait. It can be something, like I said, how does this person clean? I wouldn't clean like that. Why do they clean like that? It can be something like that. I mean,
that's kind of a funny thing.
One thing that helped us to realize is, so Daniel cares about things being, he cares if things are dirty invisibly, but not if they're dirty visibly.
okay.
So if it's sanitary but it's messy, he's great. He's cool. I don't care about things being dirty invisibly, but I do care about things being dirty visibly. So if it's visibly messy or dirty, but like sanitary, I don't care. It's still unclean to me. So we figured out like, we just see this so differently and need to meet each other where we're at in terms of like, all right, like I can learn to be more sanitary than I may have grown up being, and he can learn to be more tidy than he may have.
Yes.
Yes, I can. I get it. I get it.
That's definitely one thing. I think another thing that I think I've been learning is that like Mia like really appreciates like organization and plans and stuff, and like I knew this when we were dating, and like, oof, like truth be told, I think I was more intentional in a lot of ways when we were dating, because I was like, well, first of all, like we only hang out, at this certain time, so I'm like, I can be really intentional about these 2 hours, this is what's going on. But now it's like we're together all the time, and I'm like, I gotta be intentional all the time. And so, and whereas for me, I'm just like, hey, like I'm just floating down the lazy river of life. Whatever comes my way, I'll just take it. And Mia's like,
she's more of a planner.
Yeah, she's much more of a planner, and so that's something that like I'm needing to grow in is like my intentionality and my planning and like. And my communication, because like sometimes I'll have great plans, but it's up here, and she doesn't know what it is.
Oh, Mia, we can relate.
Oh man, I'm like, well, like, isn't it obvious what we're doing? Like, this just makes sense.
It's not.
So I've had a lot of growing to do in terms of organization in the physical space of like my office is a like it is right now, even as we speak. Like I need to clean some things up. But also just in our how we use our time and how we structure our lives and relationships. And so
Yeah.
I think that's been a big adjustment for me.
Yeah. I understand, Mia. It was actually interesting. Jared and I had a conversation the other day. He said, "Didn't you hear me say?" And I said, "No." And in my mind, I'm like, it's probably because it stayed in your head, because typically it does that. It stays in your head and it doesn't come out. And I'm like, babe, you have to say it. I can't just know your thoughts. But in his mind, he said it. Now, that's not to say he didn't. Maybe I missed it that time, right? But in my mind, I'm going to what I feel as though is the majority of the time, the thoughts stay in here and they don't come out. You know, so it's finding that balance. So yeah, it's a learning curve for sure. And what I'm reminded of as you guys were talking was that the amount of time you've been single is much longer than the amount of time you've been married. So you're so used to doing things the way that you do them. And so now that you're coming together and having to share responsibility and just sometimes uncomfortably change how you do something, because if that's what your spouse wants, then, you know, you lean towards that, you know. So yeah, it's a lot of give and take, right? But, you know, it's like I said, it's a learning process. And I think we've all been there early on in marriage. Sometimes years down the road, honestly, I don't know if it ever goes away, learning your spouse. I don't think it ever goes away. And especially because we're constantly changing individually. You know, we're changing as well. So yeah, it never goes away. But be encouraged, guys. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
So
I just had one other thought sparked by what you said about, like, you know, like maybe he's thinking it, but he didn't say it. I think I'm learning so much in marriage, but like one of the things is I think I've realized how, like, Mia gave me this great framework that she got from somewhere else about, like, when I share, what is it? Like, there's, so people talk in like seven different layers. There's like cliches and then facts. How you say it?
It's like cliches, facts, opinions, feelings, openness of like depth of sharing something. So if you're just saying cliches,
like, how you doing? You know,
right.
Or
there's no relationship there.
Yeah. And each layer adds more like relational connectedness. And openness is like, I mean, sharing your feelings, it's like, this is the reality of what's going on and how I'm feeling about it. And then openness is like, how are you feeling about it? It becomes a conversation at that point.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And so I like, through marriage, I think I've realized I live in the world of cliches, facts, and opinions 99% of the time. And so learning that Mia didn't just want to know what happened in the day or whatever. Like, she wants to know how I'm feeling, even if that feeling is I'm upset with you, because I was like, no, like, I can't, you know, like, and so I think that's something I've been learning about, like, whether it's a plan up here or an emotion or whatever, I can't just think it and not, like, I need to share it. And so I think that's been a big growing point for me.
I think that's a lot of men in general when it comes to sharing emotions, you know. Like, I don't know if it's just, I don't know. I just feel like that's just a lot of men's just story when it comes to openness and when it comes to sharing, you know. Honestly, I think as women, we're just more open about things, whereas with men, you know, I guess maybe a lot of them were taught don't share emotion. You know, if you hurt, oh, you'll be okay. You know, I don't know if that's how you grew up. You know, I don't want to assume, but that's just how you know, a lot of men tend to kind of shield their emotions. So yeah. All right. So at what point? I know you said that it's kind of been like a nonstop when it comes to just the external things that have been happening. Was there ever a point in your marriage where you kind of said to yourselves or to each other, is this ever going to get better? You know, like, why is this so hard?
You go for it.
Yeah. Yes. I think especially a lot recently, like we had a conversation maybe like a week or two ago.
I was like, you mean in the car driving here?
No. Which is, it's part of the reason why we're in marriage counseling now is
which
like,
is great.
Yeah. Like
highly recommend. So.
Yeah. It's like, it's okay to need more support and to ask for help. And so, yeah, we had a conversation just kind of admitting to each other, like, it's been hard being married to each other. And I think it had been especially hard because I had been somewhat voicing that for a while, which was hard for Daniel to hear. But then eventually, Daniel kind of said it too. And it's like, yeah, we're kind of on this page, and it's not the end of the story either. Like, God's still writing beyond this, but acknowledging where we are, it means we're there together.
And not just like, I don't know what your problem is.
Right.
It's like no, like, wow.
Yeah. Because you're a team. You're a team. How long have you guys been in marriage counseling?
Not long enough. Sorry.
You're hilarious.
No.
Just a couple weeks, I think.
Okay, so this is very new. Okay.
Well, about a month now.
Yeah, I guess 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it had been one of those things, and like, because like I have a prayer partner, and we have a prayer call every week, and well, for the most part, and he was just like, I would share some things like, yeah, like, you can be praying for me and Mia, and he would sort of be like, lightly like be like, counseling. I was like, and he's like, it's not just for when things are at like a crisis point. Like it's for maintenance. It's good for maintenance.
Yep.
And I would be like, yeah, you're kind of right. But it kind of took us getting to a crisis point for me. Like, all right, we really need counseling. Which like,
meanwhile, Mia's like, we need counseling. Yeah, no, I get it. You said something. You said there's nothing wrong with needing it, right? The scripture that always comes to mind is, in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. Your marriage counselor is one of those counselors that the Bible's talking about. That's where my mind goes, at least. You may have people at your church that counsel every now and then. You may have your pastor that counsel every now and then, and then you have actual professional counselors. And so that's the multitude that you have. And one of my questions for you was, do you have a community that you can lean on? You said that you have your marriage counselors, which is awesome. Is there any other person, any other group of people that you can lean on when it comes to sharing things that you guys are dealing with and getting some advice?
Yeah. I mean, like we had said, our church was going through so much. And so our pastor actually stepped down this past fall. So at one point he was a counselor. He did our premarital counseling. But of course that changed. And with the church where it's at, it's sort of at a point of like finding our footing and figuring out even who's still staying a part of the community. So that has unfortunately not been that. I think Daniel's parents and Daniel's family has been, my mom has been at certain moments. And we have certain friends. We actually, before we got married, I was really emphasizing to Daniel, because I had these really strong friendships. I was like, and Daniel kind of wasn't at that place in his life, in part because of moving so much. And really emphasizing like, hey, like, you're going to need to build up these strong friendships because we'll need that community to lean on when we're married. And then we did like a switcheroo, basically, where a lot of my stronger friendships just underwent transition right at around that time frame of getting married. And Daniel's became more solid and more established of like the people he could really lean on for support. And then our mentor couple, I would say, are still counselors but we just haven't been as intentional, again, around that planning and structure.
Gotcha.
So that's something we're rebuilding, I would say. And especially me, I didn't expect the fallout. But in some ways, I feel like I'm starting to wonder if God orchestrated the fallout, so I would need to learn to cling to Daniel in a way that I might not have if I'd still had that really strong support network. It doesn't mean I don't think it shouldn't be rebuilt and exist,
Right.
but it's gotten us to dive deep into things I might not have fully brought to him otherwise.
Yeah.
You guys have been through a lot of transition. Wow.
Yeah. We're kind of waiting for the ride to stop, you know. I'd like to get off, please.
Not of marriage, though.
No, not of
to be
life
abundantly
transition.
clear, Daniel. Just to be very clear.
Thank you. Keep me in check.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine just by what you guys are sharing. There's been so many changes. And like you said, those external changes, those ones that you have no control over, and then those unexpected changes, like with your friendships, right? Yeah, that's a lot to deal with being newly married. It's a lot. I would say, too, just to encourage you guys to take some of the pressure off of yourselves. And what I mean by that is with the things that have truly been out of your control, I think sometimes we feel like, but maybe I could have done something differently, or maybe I could have, and really, it was nothing you could have done. And God just may have you in this tough season right now, you know, but it's going to end at some point. It's not going to last forever. So, you guys shared about there's sort of a idolatry of marriage within our culture. So I want you to kind of talk about that, and did that have any effect on your marriage at all?
Ooh, that's where it gets real.
Ooh, wow. Well, that was part 1 of episode 33 featuring Daniel and Mia Morrison. And the title of this episode is Overcoming Our Marriage Being Hard. I hope that you are ready to tune back in next Thursday, December 28th, to see part 2 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you haven't yet, go ahead and like this episode, share it with others that they may be blessed, and also leave a comment letting us know something that stood out today. In addition, go ahead and subscribe to the channel Breakthrough Conversations if this channel has been a blessing to you. In the meantime, everyone, Merry Christmas. I hope that you enjoy the holidays, and I hope that you are ready to enter into the new year 2024. Until next time, enjoy your day and be blessed.